Lisa wiped down the sticky counter for what felt like the 100th time that day. The smell of grease and coffee filled the small diner where she had been working double shifts for the past 3 months. Her back ached, her feet hurt, and she still had 4 hours left before closing time. She glanced at the clock on the wall and sighed. Another long day that would barely cover her grandmother's medicine costs. The diner wasn't much to look at. Torn vinyl seats, flickering fluorescent lights, and a cash register that sometimes worked if you hit it just right. But it was honest work, and Lisa needed every penny she could get. Her grandmother had been her whole world since she was 2 years old, and now that the old woman was sick, Lisa would do whatever it took to take care of her. The bell above the door chimed as another customer walked in. Lisa forced a smile and grabbed the coffee pot. She had learned that tips were better when she seemed happy, even when she felt like crying from exhaustion. The man ordered a burger and fries, and Lisa went through the motions of taking his order and calling it back to the kitchen. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. Lisa usually ignored calls during work, but something made her check this one. The number wasn't familiar, but the woman on the other end sounded professional and urgent. "Is this Lisa Rodriguez?" the voice asked. "Yes, this is her," Lisa replied, moving to a quieter corner of the diner. "My name is Janet, and I'm calling from Premier Catering Services. We have an emergency situation, and your manager at the diner gave us your number. Are you available to work tonight?" Lisa's heart skipped a beat. Premier Catering was the fancy company that handled events for rich people across the city. She had never worked for them before, but she knew they paid much better than the diner. "What kind of work?" Lisa asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "We need someone to serve drinks at a private charity event. One of our regular staff members called in sick and we're desperate. The event is at a mansion in the hills, very upscale. We need someone who can handle themselves professionally around important guests." Lisa's mind raced. She had never worked at anything fancier than the local wedding hall, but she needed the money desperately. Her grandmother's medication costs had gone up again and the rent was due in 2 days. "How much does it pay?" she asked quietly. $200 for the evening, plus tips. The event runs from 6 to midnight. Lisa's breath caught. $200 was more than she made in a week at the diner. It could cover the medicine and still leave some left over for groceries. "I'll take it," she said without hesitation. Janet gave her the address and told her to arrive at 5 o'clock sharp for a quick briefing. She would need to wear all black and bring comfortable shoes. The rest of the uniform would be provided. After hanging up, Lisa realized she was shaking with nervous excitement. She finished her shift at the diner in a daze, her mind already racing ahead to the evening. She had never been to that part of the city before, where the houses were hidden behind tall gates and the lawns looked like golf courses. At home, Lisa helped her grandmother with dinner and her evening medications. The old woman noticed that something was different about her granddaughter's mood. "You seem excited about something, mija," her grandmother said, using the Spanish pet name she had called Lisa since childhood. "I got a job tonight, abuela. A good-paying job at a fancy party. It might help us catch up on some bills." Her grandmother's eyes lit up with pride. "You work so hard, Lisa. Your parents would be so proud of the woman you've become." Lisa felt a familiar pang when her grandmother mentioned her parents. She had been too young when they died to remember them clearly, but her grandmother had told her stories about how much they loved her. Sometimes Lisa wondered what her life would have been like if they had lived, but she tried not to dwell on it. Her grandmother had given her everything she could, and Lisa was grateful for that. After making sure her grandmother was comfortable for the evening, Lisa got ready for the job. She put on her best black pants and a simple black blouse. Looking in the mirror, she hoped she would fit in with the other staff members. Her long dark hair was pulled back neatly, and she had applied just a touch of makeup to look more professional. The bus ride to the hills took almost an hour. Lisa watched as the neighborhoods changed from small apartments and corner stores to bigger houses with manicured yards, and finally to massive estates hidden behind iron gates. She had never seen so much wealth in one area before. The mansion where the event was being held was unlike anything Lisa had ever seen. The driveway alone was longer than her entire street back home. Tall white columns supported a grand entrance, and beautiful gardens stretched as far as she could see. Cars worth more than most people's houses were parked along the circular drive. Lisa found the service entrance around back, where other catering staff were already gathering. Janet turned out to be a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who ran the operation like a military unit. She quickly fitted Lisa with a crisp white shirt and black vest that made her look much more professional. "Listen carefully," Janet said to the group of servers. "Tonight's event is for the Riverside Children's Hospital charity. The host is one of the city's most successful businessmen, and his guests include some very important people. You are to be polite, professional, and invisible. Serve the drinks, smile if spoken to, but don't engage in long conversations. These people value their privacy." Lisa nodded along with the others, trying to memorize every instruction. She had served tables before, but never for people who could probably buy and sell the diner without thinking twice about it. The staff was divided into teams, and Lisa was assigned to work the main ballroom with 3 other servers. As they walked through the mansion to reach their stations, Lisa couldn't help but stare at everything around her. The hallways were lined with paintings that looked like they belonged in museums. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings that seemed impossibly high. Every piece of furniture looked like it cost more than she made in a year. The ballroom itself took Lisa's breath away. Hundreds of people in expensive clothing chatted and laughed beneath sparkling lights. The women wore gowns that flowed like water, and their jewelry caught the light with every movement. The men looked comfortable and confident in their perfectly tailored suits. Everyone seemed to belong in this world of luxury and privilege. Lisa picked up her tray of champagne glasses and began moving through the crowd. At first, she felt awkward and out of place, but she soon found her rhythm. She had always been good at reading people and anticipating what they needed. Most of the guests barely noticed her, as she refilled their glasses and cleared away empty ones. As the evening went on, Lisa began to overhear bits of conversation that amazed her. People talked casually about donating hundreds of thousands of dollars to the hospital. They discussed vacation homes in places she had only seen in movies and business deals that involved more money than she could imagine. Despite the overwhelming wealth around her, Lisa noticed that these people seemed genuinely committed to helping the children's hospital. She heard story after story about lives that had been saved and families that had been helped. It made her feel good to be part of something that would make a real difference, even in a small way. The host of the party remained mostly out of sight during the first few hours. Lisa had heard other staff members mention that he was a private person who didn't enjoy being the center of attention, even at his own events. This seemed unusual to Lisa, since most wealthy people she had seen on television loved to be in the spotlight. As the evening continued, Lisa found herself feeling more confident. The other staff members had been welcoming, and several guests had complimented her service. For the first time in months, she felt proud of the work she was doing, instead of just grateful to have any work at all. But nothing could have prepared her for what she was about to discover in the mansion's private study. The party was in full swing when Janet approached Lisa with new instructions. The main ballroom was running smoothly with the other servers, and they needed someone to handle the quieter areas of the mansion, where some guests preferred to have private conversations away from the crowd. "Lisa, you've been doing excellent work tonight," Janet said, adjusting her headset. "I'm going to move you to the study and library area. Some of the VIP guests like to step away from the main party for business discussions. Just keep their glasses filled and stay out of their way." Lisa nodded, feeling a mix of pride and nervousness. Being trusted with the VIP areas meant Janet thought she was doing well, but it also meant the pressure was higher. These would be the most important guests, the ones who could make or break the catering company's reputation. She made her way through the mansion's winding hallways, following the directions Janet had given her. The further she got from the main party, the quieter everything became. The music and laughter faded to a gentle hum in the background. Here, the mansion felt more personal, more like someone's actual home rather than just a party venue. The hallways were lined with family photos and personal artwork. Lisa found herself slowing down to look at some of the pictures as she passed. There were photos of exotic vacations, business achievements, and what looked like charity events from over the years. Everything spoke of a life filled with success and privilege, but also seemed strangely lonely. Most of the photos showed just one person, a man who appeared to be the host, but very few included other people who looked like close friends or family. The study was exactly what Lisa had imagined a wealthy person's private office would look like. Dark wooden bookshelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with leather-bound books that looked both expensive and well-read. A massive mahogany desk dominated the center of the room, and comfortable leather chairs were arranged around a fireplace that looked like it had been imported from some European castle. When Lisa first entered the study, it was empty. She took a moment to arrange some fresh glasses on the side table and check that everything was clean and ready for guests. The room smelled of old books and expensive cologne, creating an atmosphere that felt both intimidating and somehow comforting. She worked. Lisa couldn't help but notice the personal items scattered around the desk. There were business awards, expensive pens, and what looked like important documents. But what caught her attention most was a collection of framed photographs, arranged carefully on one corner of the desk. Most of the photos seemed to be professional shots or business-related images, but one frame stood out from the others. It was slightly larger and made of ornate black wood that looked much older than the others. Something about it drew Lisa's attention, though she couldn't quite explain why. She tried to focus on her work, straightening magazines and adjusting the lighting, but her eyes kept drifting back to that black frame. From where she stood, she couldn't see the photo clearly, but there was something familiar about the silhouette of the person in the picture. Lisa knew she shouldn't be looking at personal items, but curiosity got the better of her. She glanced toward the door to make sure no one was coming, then stepped closer to the desk. What she saw in that frame made her drop the cleaning cloth she was holding. The woman in the photograph looked exactly like Lisa. Not similar, not kind of like her, but exactly like her. Same face, same hair, same unusual green eyes that people always commented on. Even the small birthmark near her left eye was in the exact same spot. It was as if someone had taken a photo of Lisa and dressed her up in expensive clothes from decades ago. Lisa's hands began to shake as she picked up the frame to look more closely. The woman in the photo was wearing an elegant evening gown that probably cost more than Lisa made in a year. She was standing in what looked like the same mansion, maybe even the same study where Lisa was standing now. Her smile was confident and radiant, the smile of someone who belonged in this world of wealth and luxury. But it was definitely from another time. The photo had that slightly faded quality of pictures from the 1990s, and the woman's hairstyle and makeup were clearly from that era. At the bottom of the frame, written in beautiful script handwriting, were the words, Isabella Thompson, 1995 to 1997, beloved wife. Lisa stared at the photo, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The name Isabella Thompson meant nothing to her. She had never heard it before in her life. But the face in the photo was unmistakably her own face, or at least the face of someone who could be her identical twin. Her mind raced through possibilities. Could this be a relative she had never heard of? Her grandmother had always said that Lisa's parents had no other family, that they were alone in the world when they died in that car accident, but this photo suggested otherwise. Could Isabella be her mother's sister? A cousin? But the dates on the frame troubled her. If this photo was from 1995 to 1997, and Lisa was born in 1995, then the timeline didn't make sense for an aunt or older. Cousin Lisa felt dizzy as another possibility crept into her mind. Could this Isabella woman actually be her mother? Her grandmother had always told her that her parents died when she was just 2 years old, but what if that wasn't true? What if her real mother had been someone completely different, someone who lived in mansions and wore evening gowns? She looked around the study with new eyes, suddenly feeling like an intruder in a way she hadn't before. If this Isabella was connected to the host of this party, if she had been his wife as the frame suggested, then what did that mean for Lisa? Why had she never heard of any of this? Why had her grandmother never mentioned that Lisa might have connections to one of the city's wealthiest families? The sound of voices in the hallway snapped Lisa back to reality. She quickly put the frame back exactly where she had found it and picked up her cleaning cloth, trying to look busy. But her hands were still shaking, and her mind was spinning, with questions that seemed to have no answers. Two men in expensive suits entered the study, deep in conversation about some business deal. Lisa served them drinks with trembling hands, hoping they wouldn't notice how flustered she was. They barely acknowledged her presence as they continued their discussion about stock prices and market trends, but Lisa could barely focus on their words. All she could think about was the photograph and the impossible resemblance between herself and the woman called Isabella Thompson. She tried to convince herself that it was just a coincidence, that people sometimes looked alike without being related. But the similarity was too exact, too perfect to be random chance. As the evening wore on, more guests filtered in and out of the study. Lisa continued to serve drinks and clean up, but part of her attention was always on that black frame. Every time the room was empty, she found herself looking at it again, hoping that somehow she had been mistaken, that the resemblance wasn't as strong as she had thought. But each time she looked, the truth became more undeniable. The woman in that photo could have been her twin sister, or more troubling still, could have been herself in another life. The elegant clothes and expensive jewelry couldn't hide the fact that Isabella Thompson had Lisa's exact face, down to every detail. By the time the evening began winding down, Lisa felt like she was living in a dream. Everything around her seemed surreal and disconnected from reality. The wealthy guests, the beautiful mansion, the mysterious photograph. It all felt like something that was happening to someone else. But the most disturbing part was the growing certainty that her entire life story might be built on lies. If Isabella Thompson was real, if she had lived in this mansion and been married to its owner, then what did that mean about everything Lisa had been told about her origins? What other secrets might her grandmother be keeping? And most importantly, what had happened to Isabella Thompson between 1995 and 1997 that had ended whatever life she had lived in this world of privilege and luxury? As Lisa prepared to leave the study for the final time that evening, she took one last look at the photograph. The woman's confident smile seemed to be mocking her now, as if Isabella knew secrets that Lisa could only guess at. In just a few hours, Lisa's understanding of who she was and where she came from had been completely shattered. She had no idea that her entire world was about to change even more dramatically when she came face to face with the mansion's mysterious owner. Lisa was still staring at the photograph when she heard footsteps approaching the study. Her heart jumped into her throat as she quickly stepped away from the desk, grabbing her tray and pretending to arrange the glasses. She had been so lost in thought about the mysterious Isabella that she hadn't been paying attention to her surroundings. The footsteps stopped just outside the door, and Lisa could hear someone speaking quietly on the phone. The voice was deep and tired, with an accent she couldn't quite place. Whoever it was sounded like they were wrapping up a business call. "Yes, I understand the numbers look good, but we'll discuss this tomorrow. Tonight is about the Children's Hospital, not our quarterly reports," the man said firmly. Lisa busied herself with straightening magazines on the coffee table, trying to look professional and invisible. She had been doing well all evening, and she didn't want to mess things up now by seeming like she was eavesdropping on private conversations. The man ended his call and stepped into the study. Lisa glanced up briefly to acknowledge his presence, ready to offer him a drink, but the words died in her throat. Standing in the doorway was a tall man in his mid-40s with dark hair that was just starting to show gray at the temples. He was handsome in the way that powerful, successful men often were, but there was something deeply sad in his eyes that made Lisa's heart ache just looking at him. But what really shocked her was his reaction when he saw her face. The man stopped dead in his tracks, his phone nearly slipping from his hand. His face went completely pale, and for a moment Lisa thought he might faint. He stared at her with an expression of complete disbelief, as if he was seeing a ghost. "I'm sorry," Lisa said quickly, thinking she had done something wrong. "I can leave if you need the room for private business. I was just making sure everything was clean and ready." The man didn't respond. He just kept staring at her with those sad, shocked eyes. Slowly, almost like he was afraid she might disappear if he moved too quickly, he walked further into the room. His gaze moved from Lisa's face to the photograph on his desk, then back to her face again. Lisa followed his eyes and realized he was looking at the same black frame that had captured her attention. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment as she realized he had probably seen her looking at his personal photos. She was about to apologize when he spoke for the first time. "You look exactly like her," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Exactly like Isabella. The way he said the name made Lisa's skin crawl. There was so much pain and longing in those simple words that she felt like she was intruding on something deeply private. She didn't know what to say or how to respond to such an intensely personal statement from a stranger. "I'm sorry, sir," she managed to say. "I didn't mean to look at your photos. I was just cleaning and I noticed." No, please don't apologize," he said, holding up his hand. He moved closer to his desk and picked up the black frame, holding it so they could both see it clearly. "Tell me, what do you see when you look at this photograph?" Lisa looked at the image again, her hands trembling slightly. Up close with better lighting, the resemblance was even more striking than before. It really was like looking at herself dressed up for a fancy party in the 1990s. "I see a woman who looks like me," Lisa admitted quietly. "Almost exactly like me. I don't understand how that's possible." The man's eyes filled with tears, though he tried to blink them away. He set the frame back down carefully, as if it was made of the most fragile glass in the world. "Her name was Isabella Thompson," he said softly. "She was my wife, the most beautiful, kind, intelligent woman I ever met. And she disappeared 26 years ago without a trace." Lisa felt like the room was spinning around her. 26 years ago would have been 1997, right around the time she was born. The timeline was starting to make a terrifying kind of sense. "She was pregnant when she disappeared," the man continued, his voice getting stronger but more emotional. "We had been married for 2 years, and we were so excited about starting a family. But then one day she was just gone. No note, no explanation, nothing. The police investigated, but they never found any evidence of what happened to her." Lisa's legs felt weak, and she had to sit down in one of the leather chairs. This was too much of a coincidence to ignore. A pregnant woman who looked exactly like her disappearing in 1997, the same year Lisa was supposedly born to parents who died in a car accident. What was she like? Lisa heard herself asking, though she wasn't sure why. The man's face softened as he began to remember. "She was from a working-class family, very different from my world. She was teaching elementary school when we met at a charity event, actually very similar to tonight's party. She was there as a volunteer, helping to organize activities for some of the children who were patients at the hospital." He walked over to a bookshelf and pulled out a photo album, bringing it back to show Lisa. As he flipped through the pages, Lisa saw dozens of photos of the woman from the black frame. In some, she was laughing at dinner parties. In others, she was volunteering at what looked like soup kitchens or homeless shelters. But in every photo, she looked exactly like Lisa. "Isabella had this beautiful laugh," the man continued, lost in his memories. "She would hum when she was cooking, always the same song from an old movie she loved. And she had this habit of tucking her hair behind her left ear when she was nervous or thinking hard about something." Lisa's hand automatically went to her left ear, where she realized she had been unconsciously tucking her own hair throughout their conversation. It was a nervous habit she had developed as a child, something her grandmother had always teased her about. She loved old movies, especially the romantic ones from the 1940s and 50s, he went on. She could quote entire scenes from Casablanca and Roman Holiday, and she had the biggest heart of anyone I ever knew. She was always trying to help people who were less fortunate. Every detail he mentioned sent chills down Lisa's spine. She loved old movies too, particularly the romantic classics. She had grown up watching them with her grandmother on their old television, and she had always felt drawn to help others, even when she barely had enough for herself. "But our marriage caused problems," the man admitted, his voice turning darker. "My business associates, my family, they didn't approve of Isabella. They thought she was only interested in my money, that she was some kind of gold digger who had tricked me into marriage. The harassment got worse as time went on." "What kind of harassment?" Lisa asked, though she was afraid to hear the answer. "Phone calls in the middle of the night, letters telling her to leave me or face consequences." Someone even broke into our apartment before we moved to this house. Isabella tried to hide how scared she was, but I could see it was affecting her. She started looking over her shoulder everywhere we went. The man sat down heavily in the chair across from Lisa, suddenly looking much older than his years. The last few weeks before she disappeared, Isabella had been investigating some irregularities in my company's finances. She had a good head for numbers, and she noticed that money was missing from several of our charity accounts. She thought someone was stealing from the foundations we supported. Lisa leaned forward, completely absorbed in the story. Did she find out who it was? She never got the chance to tell me, he said sadly. The night before she disappeared, she said she had figured out who was behind the theft and that she was going to confront them the next day. But when I came home from work, she was gone. All her clothes were still in the closet, her car was still in the garage, but Isabella was nowhere to be found. And the baby? Lisa whispered, though she was almost certain she already knew the answer. I hired the best private investigators money could buy, but we never found a trace of either Isabella or our child. For 26 years I've wondered if they were killed, if they ran away, if they're somewhere living under different names. It's been the greatest mystery and the greatest pain of my life. The man looked up at Lisa with those sad, hopeful eyes, until tonight when I walked into my own study and saw my wife's face looking back at me. Lisa's mind was reeling with everything she had learned. The dates matched perfectly with her birth year. The description of Isabella sounded exactly like her own personality and habits. And most convincing of all, the woman in the photographs looked like her identical twin. What was your wife's maiden name? Lisa asked quietly. Rodriguez, he answered. Isabella Rodriguez. Lisa felt like she had been struck by lightning. Rodriguez was her last name, the name her grandmother had given her. But her grandmother had always claimed it was Lisa's father's name, not her mother's. As the truth began to dawn on both of them, Lisa realized that her entire life story had been built on lies. And the man sitting across from her with his sad eyes and broken heart might very well be her father. Lisa barely slept that night. She had taken the man's business card before leaving the mansion, and his name was printed in elegant letters. David Blackwell, CEO of Blackwell Industries. He had given her his personal phone number and asked her to call him the next day, but Lisa wasn't sure she was ready for that conversation yet. The ride home on the bus had been a blur. Her mind kept replaying every detail of their conversation, every photograph she had seen, every similarity between herself and the mysterious Isabella. By the time she reached her small apartment, Lisa felt like she was living in someone else's life. Her grandmother was already asleep when Lisa got home, but she could hear the older woman's labored breathing from the next room. The sound reminded Lisa of why she had taken the catering job in the first place, and suddenly all the questions about her identity seemed less important than making sure her grandmother got the medical care she needed. But as Lisa lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she couldn't stop thinking about what David had told her. If Isabella Rodriguez really was her mother, then everything her grandmother had ever told her about her past was a lie. And if that was true, what other secrets might the old woman be hiding? The next morning, Lisa sat at the kitchen table watching her grandmother make breakfast. The older woman moved slowly, her arthritis making every task more difficult than it should be. But she hummed while she worked, the same tune she had hummed for as long as Lisa could remember. It was an old song, from a movie Lisa had never been able to identify. Abuela, Lisa said carefully, I need to ask you something important. Her grandmother looked up from the eggs she was scrambling, immediately sensing the serious tone in Lisa's voice. What is it, mija? You look like you didn't sleep at all last night. I need you to tell me the truth about my parents, Lisa said, directly. And I need you to tell me about a woman named Isabella Rodriguez. The wooden spoon her grandmother was holding clattered to the floor. The older woman's face went completely white, and she gripped the edge of the counter to steady herself. For a moment, Lisa thought her grandmother might collapse. Where did you hear that name? Her grandmother whispered. So you do know who she is, Lisa said, her heart pounding. Abuela, please, I need to know the truth. Is Isabella Rodriguez my mother? Her grandmother sank into a chair across from Lisa, suddenly looking every one of her 73 years. She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands folded in her lap. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "I promised her I would never tell you," she said. "I promised I would keep you safe." Lisa felt like the world was tilting around her. Keep me safe from what? Abuela, what really happened to my parents? Her grandmother got up slowly and walked to her bedroom. Lisa heard her moving things around, opening drawers and boxes. When she came back, she was carrying an old shoebox that Lisa had never seen before. "Isabella was my roommate in college," her grandmother began, setting the box on the table between them. "We stayed friends after graduation, even though our lives went in very different directions. She became a teacher, got married to a very wealthy man. I thought she was living a fairy tale life." Lisa's hands were shaking as her grandmother opened the box. Inside were dozens of letters, photographs, and documents that looked like they had been hidden for decades. "But then she showed up at my door one night in early 1997. Her grandmother continued. "She was 6 months pregnant, terrified, and had almost nothing with her except the clothes on her back. She said people were trying to hurt her because of something she had discovered about her husband's business." Her grandmother pulled out a photograph and handed it to Lisa. It showed a younger version of her grandmother standing next to a pregnant woman who looked exactly like Lisa. They were both smiling, but Lisa could see fear in the pregnant woman's eyes. "Isabella stayed with me for 3 months, her grandmother said. She was too scared to go back to her husband, but she also couldn't bring herself to tell him where she was. She was afraid that whoever was threatening her might hurt him, too, if they knew he was in contact with her." Lisa looked through more of the photographs. There were pictures of Isabella reading baby books, painting a small nursery in what Lisa now recognized as her grandmother's spare room, and smiling while holding tiny baby clothes. "She gave birth to you right here in this apartment," her grandmother said softly. "We couldn't risk going to a hospital because Isabella was afraid they would find her. I had worked as a nurse before I retired, so I helped deliver you myself." Lisa's eyes filled with tears as she realized she was holding a photograph of her mother, holding her as a newborn baby. Isabella looked exhausted but happy, gazing down at the tiny infant with pure love in her eyes. But something went wrong during the delivery, her grandmother continued, her own voice breaking. "Isabella lost too much blood, and by the time I realized how serious it was too late to get help. She died just a few hours after you were born." The room was completely silent except for the sound of both women crying. Lisa held the photograph of her mother closer, trying to memorize every detail of Isabella's face. "Before she died, Isabella made me promise 2 things, her grandmother said. "First, that I would raise you as my own granddaughter and never let anyone know your real identity. And second, that I would keep all of her belongings until you were old enough to understand the truth." Her grandmother reached deeper into the box and pulled out a manila envelope that was sealed with wax. "She made me promise not to open this until you turned 25, or until someone came looking for you. She said it contained everything you would need to know about who you really are." Lisa stared at the envelope, afraid to touch it. Her 26th birthday had been 2 months ago, which meant she had been old enough to learn the truth for a while now. But more importantly, someone had come looking for her, even if he didn't know it yet. "There's more," her grandmother said, quietly. She pulled out a small wooden box that looked very old and expensive. Isabella said this belonged to her grandmother, and that it should go to her daughter when she was old enough. Inside the wooden box was a delicate gold locket on a chain. When Lisa opened it, she found a tiny photograph of a young couple on one side and an inscription on the other that read, "For our daughter, with all our love." "And this," her grandmother said, handing Lisa an official-looking document, "is your real birth certificate." Lisa's hands trembled as she read the paper. It clearly stated that she had been born Lisa Isabella Blackwell on March 15, 1997. Her mother was listed as Isabella Rodriguez Blackwell, and her father was listed as David Michael Blackwell. "Blackwell," Lisa whispered. "His last name is Blackwell." Her grandmother nodded sadly. Isabella loved him very much, but she was convinced that staying with him would get all three of you killed. She thought the only way to keep you safe was to disappear completely. Lisa looked through more of the documents in the envelope. There were love letters from David to Isabella, photographs of their wedding, and most shocking of all, bank statements showing that Isabella had been putting money into a savings account under Lisa's real name. She wanted to make sure you would have something when you grew up, her grandmother explained. Even if she couldn't give you the life of wealth and privilege you were born into, she wanted you to have choices. But the most disturbing items in the envelope were copies of the threatening letters Isabella had received. Lisa read through them with growing horror. Someone had been systematically terrorizing her mother, threatening not just Isabella but her unborn child as well. The last letter came just a week before Isabella went into labor, her grandmother said. It said they knew where she was hiding, and that if she didn't disappear permanently, they would kill both her and the baby. Lisa found the letter and read it with shaking hands. The message was typed and unsigned, but the threat was clear and specific. Someone had wanted Isabella, gone so badly that they were willing to kill an innocent child to make it happen. But who would do this? Lisa asked. And why? Her grandmother pulled out one final document from the bottom of the envelope. It was a photocopy of financial records that showed someone had been stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars from David's charitable foundations. Isabella figured out who was stealing the money, her grandmother said. She had proof that one of David's business partners was not only stealing from the charities, but also using the foundations to launder money from other illegal activities. When she threatened to expose him, he decided it would be easier to get rid of her permanently. Lisa stared at the name on the financial documents. Thomas Mitchell, David's former business partner and closest friend. According to the paperwork, he had been systematically stealing from multiple charities for years, using his position in David's company to cover his tracks. Isabella planned to give all of this evidence to the police after you were born, her grandmother said. But she never got the chance. As Lisa sat surrounded by the truth about her past, she realized that her mother had died not just from complications during childbirth, but from the stress and fear of being hunted by someone who wanted her dead. And somewhere out there, her father had spent 26 years grieving for a wife and child. He thought he had lost forever, never knowing that his daughter was alive and living just across the city. The question now was whether Lisa was brave enough to contact David and tell him the truth, and whether it was safe for either of them if she did. Lisa stared at David's business card for 3 days before she found the courage to call him. She had spent those days reading through every letter, looking at every photograph, and trying to process the fact that her entire life had been built on lies meant to protect her. Her grandmother had been patient, answering every question Lisa had about Isabella and those terrifying months in 1997. Finally, on Thursday morning, Lisa dialed the number David had written on the back of his card. Her hands were shaking so badly, she could barely hold the phone. "This is David," he answered on the second ring. "It's Lisa," she said quietly. "The waitress from the party. You said I could call you." There was a pause and she could hear him take a deep breath. "I've been hoping you would. Can we meet somewhere? I have so many questions, and I imagine you do too." They arranged to meet at a small coffee shop downtown, neutral ground where they could talk privately. Lisa arrived early and chose a table in the back corner, away from other customers. She brought the shoebox with all of Isabella's belongings, knowing that David would want to see proof of everything she was about to tell him. When David walked into the coffee shop, Lisa could see that he looked as nervous as she felt. He had dark circles under his eyes, like he hadn't been sleeping well either. But when he spotted her at the table, his face lit up with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "I wasn't sure you would really come," he said as he sat down across from her. "Part of me was afraid I had imagined the whole thing." Lisa pushed the shoebox across the table toward him. "I think you need to see these first before I tell you everything I learned." David's hands trembled as he opened the box and saw the photographs of Isabella. He picked up the picture of her holding newborn Lisa, and tears immediately filled his eyes. "This is her," he whispered. "This is really Isabella, and this baby. Is me, Lisa finished. Your daughter. David set the photograph down carefully and looked at Lisa with wonder. I have a daughter. After 26 years of not knowing, of wondering if you were alive or dead, you're sitting right here in front of me. Lisa told him everything. About Isabella arriving at her grandmother's apartment, terrified and pregnant. About the birth complications that had cost Isabella her life. About the threatening letters and the evidence Isabella had gathered against Thomas Mitchell. David listened without interrupting, his expression changing from shock to anger to grief, and back to amazement. Thomas Mitchell, he said when Lisa finished her story. I should have known. After Isabella disappeared, he was the one who convinced me to stop looking for her. He said I needed to move on, that she had probably left me for someone else. He was so convincing in his sympathy. Where is he now? Lisa asked. He died in a car accident about 10 years ago, David said. Drunk driving. I guess he never had to face justice for what he did to your mother. They sat in silence for a while, both processing the magnitude of what they had learned. Finally, David spoke again. I want to do a DNA test, he said. Not because I doubt you, but because I need it to be official. I need to be absolutely certain so we can move forward. Lisa nodded. She had expected this and wanted the same certainty, herself. The DNA results came back a week later, confirming what they both already knew in their hearts. Lisa was definitely David's daughter, and Isabella had been telling the truth about everything in those letters and documents. But knowing the truth and figuring out what to do about it were two very different things. Lisa found herself torn between two worlds that couldn't have been more different. On one side was her simple life with her grandmother, where every dollar mattered, and luxury was having enough money to pay all the bills on time. On the other side was David's world of wealth and privilege, where her inheritance alone could set her up for life. I don't know how to be rich, Lisa told David during one of their many long conversations. I don't know how to live in that world. You don't have to change who you are, David assured her. You're perfect exactly as you are. Your mother was the same way. She never let the money change her heart. David showed Lisa the bank account Isabella had set up for her. Over the years, with interest and careful investments David had made on her behalf once he discovered it existed, the account had grown to over $200,000. It was more money than Lisa had ever imagined having, but even more valuable than the money was the relationship that began to develop between Lisa and David. He told her stories about Isabella that her grandmother didn't know, sharing memories of their courtship and early marriage. Lisa learned that her mother had been passionate about helping children, which explained why Lisa had always felt drawn to volunteer work, despite having so little time and money. Your mother would have been so proud of you, David said one afternoon, as they walked through the children's hospital where Isabella had volunteered. She always said that the most important thing in life was to help people who couldn't help themselves. Lisa began spending time at David's mansion, slowly getting used to the luxury and grandeur that could have been her birthright. But she also insisted that David come to her apartment to meet her grandmother properly and see how she had really grown up. The two older adults bonded over their shared love for Lisa and their memories of Isabella. I can never thank you enough for what you did, David told Lisa's grandmother. You saved my daughter's life and raised her to be an incredible woman. Isabella was like a daughter to me too, her grandmother replied. Keeping Lisa safe was the least I could do. As the months passed, Lisa made some important decisions about her future. She used part of her inheritance to pay for her grandmother's medical treatments and to buy a nicer apartment where the older woman could be more comfortable. But instead of quitting work entirely, Lisa decided to go back to school to study social work inspired by her mother's dedication to helping others. I want to work with families in crisis, Lisa told David. I want to help women who are in situations like my mother was, who need someone to believe in them and keep them safe. David was so proud of her decision that he offered to fund a scholarship program in Isabella's name for young women pursuing degrees in social work or education. Lisa would help run the program, ensuring that her mother's legacy would live on through helping others. Lisa also convinced David to start attending therapy, to work through the grief and guilt he had carried for 26 years. You couldn't have saved her, Lisa told him, but you can honor her memory by taking care of yourself and being the father she would have wanted you to be. The relationship between father and daughter grew stronger every day. David taught Lisa about business and investments while Lisa helped him reconnect with the simple pleasures in life that he had forgotten during his years of grief. They cooked dinner together, watched Isabella's favorite old movies, and slowly built the family bond that had been stolen from them by fear and lies. 1 year after that fateful charity gala, Lisa organized a memorial service for Isabella at adhering, the children's hospital. David spoke about his wife's kindness and generosity, while Lisa talked about the mother she had never known, but whose values had shaped her entire life through her grandmother's stories. "My mother died protecting me," Lisa said to the gathered crowd of family friends and hospital staff. "But her love didn't die with her. It lived on through the woman who raised me, and now it lives on through the work we're doing to help other families stay together and stay safe." As Lisa looked out at the audience, she saw her grandmother sitting in the front row next to David, both of them crying happy tears. She realized that although she had lost 26 years with her father and had never gotten to meet her mother, she had been blessed with a family that loved her unconditionally. The little girl who had grown up thinking she was alone in the world had discovered that she was actually surrounded by love. And the best part was that she could now use her story to help other children who needed to know that they weren't alone either. Lisa had finally found her way home, not to a place, but to the family and purpose she was always meant to have.